Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a very special event. My name is Melissa Morris, and I am the Southern California Field Representative based in San Diego for Oceana. Today, you will hear from three diverse speakers from coast to coast of our nation, from the Hispanic and Latin community. They will each speak to us about their work in the ocean conservation world. You will also hear a little bit about the Magnuson-Stevens Act. Let's kick this off with our first speaker, Tatiana Castro. Hola, gracias por estar con nosotros hoy en un evento muy especial. Mi nombre es Melissa Morris y yo soy la representante de campo de Sur de California para Oceana. Hoy escuchará a tres presentadores diversos de costa a costa de la comunidad hispana y latina. Nos hablarán sobre su trabajo en el mundo de la conservación de los océanos junto con información sobre la ley de Magnuson-Stevens. Comencemos con nuestro primer presentador, Tatiana Castro. Tatiana Castro se mudó a Nueva Jersey de Cali, Colombia, cuando tenía 8 años. Aprendió inglés rápidamente, pero extrañaba la convivencia con la naturaleza que está arraigada con la cultura colombiana. Fue entonces cuando Tatiana supo que quería ser un puente entre el lugar donde nos encontramos y hacia donde queremos llegar. Previamente trabajó para The Nature Conservancy y está encantada de unirse al equipo de restauración de Billion Oyster Project. Cuando no está yendo a Governor's Island, Tatiana actúa como bailarina de salsa. Le encanta el senderismo y después de estudiar en Florencia, aprovecha cada oportunidad para viajar y ver nuevas culturas. Tatiana, gracias por estar con nosotros hoy.
Hola, Melissa, mucho gusto. Gracias a ustedes por tenerme aquí hoy. Me siento muy afortunada y estoy muy contenta por poder ser parte de algo tan bonito y algo tan importante que es compartir y educar al público, no solo en inglés, pero también en español. O sea que les agradezco mucho por crear esta oportunidad para el público hispano que también comparta y aprenda un poco sobre lo que está pasando en el mar en este momento y qué estamos haciendo para mejorar. Entonces, otra vez, mi nombre es Tatiana Castro, yo soy colombiana, nací en Cali, Colombia y me vine a los 8 años. En ese momento soy la coordinadora de restauración de Billion Oyster Project y he estado trabajando en esta organización hace 3 años. Me gradué con biología marina de la Universidad de Monmouth en el 2016 y en los años, mientras estaba creciendo en Colombia, me di cuenta de que, como Melissa les había mencionado, sentía como que había, no sé, como que había un vacío, como que algo me faltaba. Cuando llegué a los Estados Unidos, en Colombia, yo trepaba a los árboles, corría descalza, iba al parque con mi familia y al río, nadaba con mis primos y mis amigos y eso era normal. Y cuando llegué a los Estados Unidos la vida era muy diferente, ahora era más que todo ver televisión, estar en el celular, no tenía tanta conexión con la naturaleza y eso me hacía mucha falta a mí. Entonces, eso me interesó, como que me hizo creer que necesitaba hacer algo para conectarme otra vez con el agua, con los animales, con la naturaleza. Y eso fue lo que me hizo escoger mi carrera en biología marina. Entonces empecé a trabajar con Billion Oyster Project, como dije, hace 3 años y desde ese tiempo he estado tratando de restaurar ostras al puerto de Nueva York. Entonces, en este momento voy a compartir con ustedes algunas fotos y una presentación que he preparado para compartirles un poquito más de mi trabajo. Ok, perfecto. Entonces, como les venía diciendo, el puerto de Nueva York tiene muchos animales en el mar y las ostras eran muy populares hace muchos años. Las ostras son una parte muy importante de la historia del puerto de Nueva York y por eso tenemos que seguir tratando de restaurar las ostras. El puerto de Nueva York albergaba a miles de millones de ostras. Y esos arrecifes de ostras brindaban tres servicios ecosistémicos vitales para el río Hudson. Eh, Estas ostras no solo son una fuente de proteína y de alimento para los neoyorquinos, también crean un hábitat para otros animales y otras especies marinas. Ellos forman hogares para los caballos de mar, para muchas clases de peces, para los cangrejos. Hay tantos animales que no sabemos que están debajo del puerto de Nueva York, debajo de esas aguas, que nunca las vemos porque no tenemos tanto acceso al mar. Cuando la gente viene a Nueva York, no piensa más que todo en el agua y en los animales que viven en Nueva York, sino que piensan en los edificios, en andar por las calles de Nueva York, pero no tanto en las aguas de Nueva York. Y es muy importante para los neoyorquinos poder no solo tener las ostras para alimento, pero también para que las ostras y los arrecifes de ostras protejan nuestras costas en Nueva York. Las ostras también filtran agua. No sé si sabían, pero las ostras son capaces de filtrar más o menos 50 litros de agua al día o 50 galones, que en cambio serían más o menos como 190 litros de agua en un día. Eso sería solo una ostra adulta. Imagínense qué podemos hacer más o menos con 1 billón de ostras. Sería un trabajo grandísimo que estamos haciendo por el mar de Nueva York. Eh, las ostras también, eh, como les dije, pueden crear hábitats para otros animales y eso es muy importante porque desafortunadamente nosotros, los humanos, contaminamos el mar de Nueva York demasiado y sacamos demasiadas ostras del agua en muy corto tiempo, nunca los dejamos reproducirse entre ellos mismos. Entonces, no solo mermamos la cantidad de ostras que habían en el agua, pero también las estábamos enfermando y cuando no las comíamos nos enfermábamos nosotros también, porque en ese tiempo no habían regulaciones de los políticos, no habían reglas para compañías, no podían, ellos podían contaminar el agua y nadie les decía nada. Y eso enfermó las ostras y se enfermaron tanto que ya no hay, casi no hay ostras creciendo naturalmente en las costas de Nueva York, en los puertos de Nueva York. Entonces nosotros estamos tratando de volver a traer las ostras a Nueva York, que sería muy importante para el ecosistema en nuestras aguas. Pero para eso necesitamos la ayuda de todos los neoyorquinos, necesitamos voluntarios, necesitamos educar no solo a los adultos, pero también a los niños, más que todo a los niños. Si podemos ayudar y educar a los estudiantes a que tengan esa conciencia de que tenemos que cuidar los mares, que tenemos que cuidar a los animales, de qué hacen las ostras y por qué son tan importantes. Ellos pueden compartir eso con sus papás y con sus abuelos, pueden hacer algo y tal vez quieran involucrarse en biología marina, tal vez me pueden ver a mí o pueden ver a mis compañeros y decir, yo quiero hacer ese trabajo. Entonces, por eso nos gusta traer a las escuelas a que sean voluntarios por un día y que nos ayuden a medir las ostras, que nos ayuden a ver si están vivas o si están muertas y qué otros organismos encontramos con las ostras. En este momento, hasta hoy en día, tenemos 75 millones de ostras restauradas al mar de Nueva York. Tenemos más o menos 2 millones de libras de cáscaras recolectadas de los restaurantes, porque sí, los restaurantes alrededor de Nueva York donan sus conchas de ostras, nos las donan a nosotros después de que se las comen en los restaurantes y nosotros utilizamos esas mismas conchas para poner más ostras en el agua. Entonces nos ayudan un montón cuando ustedes salen a los restaurantes y comen ostras con los restaurantes que tenemos, con los que estamos asociados. Hemos participado con más de 8,000 estudiantes y con maestras que se comprometen a salir con nosotros y a contar ostras, a medir las ostras. También hemos tenido más de 11,000 voluntarios que vienen y nos ayudan en los días del verano, cuando hace frío, cuando hace calor, no importa, ellos vienen y nos ayudan a crear las nos ayudan, tenemos más o menos 11,000 voluntarios que vienen y nos ayudan en los días calientes, en los días fríos, no les importa, ellos vienen y nos ayudan a recolectar las conchas de las ostras, nos ayudan a medir las ostras, a crear los contenedores que tienen las ostras. Entonces necesitamos la ayuda de todos los neoyorquinos para que vengan y participen. Y no solo los neoyorquinos, también hay personas que vienen de otros estados a ayudarnos. La gente también puede donar monetariamente si creen que lo que estamos haciendo es importante. Así crecen las ostras, es una de nuestras estructuras que tenemos en las aguas de Nueva York, y de estas hemos puesto muchas, muchas en el agua. Las ostras crecen en cualquier cosa que sea dura, por ejemplo, o conchas marinas, pero también en llantas, en porcelana, en lo que encuentren, ellas son muy fuertes, entonces van creciendo a todo dar. A mí me encanta mucho mi trabajo, me inspira mucho ver que la gente se involucre en esta clase de trabajo, que se quiera educar, que les importe el medio ambiente, que quieran salir y querer ser parte de algo más grande que solo nosotros mismos. Yo sé que todos estamos muy ocupados, que todos tenemos muchas cosas pasando en nuestra vida, muchas cosas que hacer, pero cuando la gente trata de tomar conciencia y de salir a participar, a donar su tiempo, a traer a sus hijos al agua y a educarlos un poquito, yo creo que es muy importante de que todos estemos aquí participando en todo nuestro trabajo. Entonces, muchas gracias por estar aquí, gracias por tomar conciencia y por querer ayudar. Si a ustedes les importa un poquito más de mi organización, por favor, síganos en Billion Oyster en Instagram, y también billionoyster.org es el nombre de nuestra página, o sea que síganos, y si tienen algunas preguntas, por favor, mándenme un mensaje o lo que sea.
Y gracias a todos para escuchar, y otra vez gracias por tu tiempo aquí hablando con nosotros, y te agradezco. Bueno. Thank you all for staying with us throughout this fantastic hour-long presentation. Our second speaker for the event is a local San Diego, Carlos Gallardo. Carlos is the California Conservation Coordinator at Wild Coast here in San Diego, California. As a member of the conservation team, he works on the Blue Carbon Initiative, Explore My Marine Protected Area Youth Programs, Wetland Restoration Projects, and Marine Protected Area Watch. From 2018 to 2020, he was an intern on Wild Coast's conservation team. He also volunteered as a research assistant at Scripps Institution of Oceanography and holds a BA in Environmental Policy from UC San Diego. Carlos, thank you for being here with us today. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so grateful that Oceana has given me the opportunity to speak here today and to share my story and some of the work that I'm doing today.
We are so excited to hear all about it. So please, whenever you're ready, feel free to share.
Now, for starters, I'd like to talk a little bit about Wild Coast. Wild Coast is an international team that conserves coastal marine ecosystems and addresses climate change through natural solutions. Some of our projects in Mexico include protecting the gray whale migratory corridor and breeding lagoons. The gray whale has the largest migration of any animal on Earth, and we work all along California and Baja, helping conserve those beautiful habitats. We protect sea turtle hatching beaches from poachers, feral dogs, and so much more to ensure that these turtle populations are thriving. We work to conserve and restore mangrove forests in Mexico, working with local communities to replant and maintain these beautiful habitats, and they act as blue carbon ecosystems and massive carbon sinks that also protect from storm surge and sea level rise as the effects of climate change grow. We also work to purchase conservation easements in Baja, protecting some of our most pristine coast along the Pacific, and work with local communities to help manage these areas. Some of our projects include stopping cross-border pollution of marine debris and solid waste. We've installed a trash boom in Los Laureles Canyon in Tijuana that stops plastics and solid trash from passing across the border and entering our oceans out of the Tijuana River watershed. Well, we work with local community members there to collect the trash and see where it's coming from. And here in the United States, we work primarily with marine protected areas, which is the work I'm involved in, as well as blue carbon habitat restoration. Now, my story begins back in 2018 when I started as an intern at Wild Coast, and I knew from my second day that this was the work I wanted to be doing, and this was the work I love. My first day was an introduction to the organization. Just talked a little bit about what we do, some of our projects, and I got the overview. And my supervisors asked me if I could go set up a table at an event the very next day by myself and do outreach to the local communities at one of the high schools. And I said, yes, of course. And I knew that moment when I was playing educational games with the kids, talking to their families about conservation efforts and conservation sciences going on in the world. When I could see the engagement and the interaction with them, I knew that this was the work I wanted to do and that this was the work I wanted to be a part of. Now, a lot of my work involved plenty of administrative tasks, assisting with reports, organizing spreadsheets, but I also got into the field a lot. Back as an intern, one of my primary areas of focus was leading youth programs in our Explore My MPA program, or my Explore My Marine Protected Area. Explore My MPA took kids from underserved and indigenous communities and helped connect them with the ocean to give them an experience they otherwise wouldn't have had. We often taught them about the ongoing conservation science at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, or we took them out to collect data and become the scientists in community science programs and collecting water quality data and providing not just an educational experience, but also connecting them to the ocean by giving them this hands-on program to work in. Now, through these programs, we've fostered so many amazing partnerships. Personally, I've gotten the opportunity to work with enforcement officials, local community members, resource managers, stakeholders, and so many more. One of these partnerships was with Mar Vista High School, which this is a group of students I worked with personally, who we organized beach cleanup events in their community in Imperial Beach. And I worked with other groups of students from the same class to do all sorts of internship projects with us. And fostering these relationships was one of the most fulfilling things, and it's why I continue to do the work I do today. On top of that, we have so many other great opportunities and so many great partners. Like this is a picture from the Batiquitos Lagoon Foundation kayak cleanup, which is a once-a-year event. This is the only time of the year boats are allowed onto the Batiquitos Lagoon State Marine Conservation Area, as this is a marine protected area. And I have the opportunity to take youth out onto the water and help pick up trash from our lagoon in a once-a-year event, and it's fantastic. And I'll be talking more about my partnership with Batiquitos a little later because they're one of my partners I work very closely with today. Now on to the work I'm involved in today. My two areas of focus are marine protected area management and enforcement and blue carbon research and restoration. Now, one of the projects we work on is the Marine Monitor Radar, or M2. Marine Monitor is a branch of the Anthropocene Institute, who Wild Coast have partnered with to install several radar units across the coast of San Diego County. These radar units monitor boating activity in and around marine protected areas to identify what we call poaching behaviors. Based on the movements of boats, their speed, bearing, time spent within MPAs, we can determine remotely what is likely to be a boat engaging in poaching or violation of marine protected area regulations. Now, what we do is myself or a colleague will go out either land-based or on a boat to observe what the radar is seeing. And when we can confirm visually that the radar is seeing a poaching behaviors, we log that in our system, and there's a machine learning algorithm in the radar that gets better at identifying these poaching movements based on the data we input into it. And we partner with Department of Fish and Wildlife to make sure this data is accessible to them and they have access to the radar, so that way they can use these radar units to monitor marine protected areas remotely, so that they don't need to be on the water to know that violations are happening. With this technology, they can remotely monitor marine protected areas and better allocate their resources and their monitoring efforts to manage our coastal resources. Now, some of our sites include a couple of our MPAs in La Jolla and Swamis, and these marine monitors also spread out all across the Pacific and I believe the Gulf of Mexico as well. Now, my next MPA monitoring effort I'm part of is MPA Watch. I'm the San Diego County Coordinator for MPA Watch. MPA Watch is a statewide program which NGO partners from all coastal counties of California train volunteers to collect human use data in and around marine protected areas. The data we track is the amount of people at the beach and what kind of activities they're doing. With this information, we can better understand how our marine resources are being used, and stakeholders, resource managers, enforcement officials can all use this information to best allocate their resources to manage these ecosystems as best as possible. Now that's my work with MPA management and enforcement. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about the work we do with blue carbon ecosystems. Now, blue carbon ecosystems are coastal marine ecosystems that are extremely effective at storing carbon, which is hence why they're called blue carbon. These ecosystems include salt marshes, eelgrass beds, mangrove forests, like where we work in Mexico, and our local lagoons here in San Diego. I'm working with Dr. Matt Costa out of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography to study the carbon stock and sequestration rate of these local lagoons here in San Diego. We've been doing sampling in San Diego Lagoon, Kendall Frost Marsh, and Formosa Slough to best understand the effectiveness of these ecosystems at sequestering and storing carbon long term. The way we do this is we get out into this field with this device called a Russian peat corer, and we take samples at various depths. With these samples, we can identify the carbon stock, the amount of carbon each of these samples can be used to estimate the carbon stored in the lagoon as a whole. And we also, because we take them at various depths, we can date the samples and establish a sequestration rate to understand how much carbon is being stored each year and what the total stock is. Now, with this information, we already have some preliminary data at one of our sites that shows that our local lagoons here in San Diego can store about 2 to 3 times as much carbon as our terrestrial ecosystems like grasslands and chaparral that we find here in Southern California. So these blue carbon ecosystems have carbon storing superpowers. And with the work we're doing, the analysis in the lab and all this work has been accumulating into what we're hoping to guide future policy. With the information we've gathered, we're hoping to create a guidance document to provide best practices for restoration of these wetland habitats and the data to back up why this work is so important. Using this data, we can tell these lawmakers at the city level, county, and state level one day how to best account for blue carbon ecosystems in their climate action planning as a carbon sink to help in the fight against climate change using natural climate solutions. And lastly, I would like to talk a little bit about our restoration work. We work in some of the local lagoons here in San Diego to take volunteer groups out to work with our partners at San Diego River Valley Conservancy and the Bataquios Lagoon Foundation to remove invasive plant species, replant natives, do watering on the newly installed plants, do trail maintenance to make sure that these wonderful habitats can be enjoyed respectfully. These habitats are home to so many beautiful creatures that we want to ensure people can access these places and experience that beauty for themselves. So it's important to not just think about the natural aspect of it, but think about the human interface, because these are ecosystems for all to be enjoyed. And on that note, I'd like to thank Oceana once again for allowing me to speak about my journey as a conservationist and the work I do today. If anyone would like more information, please go to wildcoast.org, or you can email me at carlos@wildcoast.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlos. We've all learned a lot about local work here in San Diego, and it's truly impressive and very informative and critical to the conservation of our planet. So thank you for joining us, and we're excited to share your story with our audience. Thank you for listening to both Tatiana and Carlos's wonderful stories and how they began their work in ocean conservation. Our final guest speaker tonight, before we head into the Magnuson-Stevens explanation of our event, is Reynaldo Diaz. Reynaldo is a Floridian who was raised in Lake Worth and of Argentinian and Salvadorian descent. He earned his JD from Nova Southeastern University, specializing in environmental law and land use law. Inspired by his heritage, Reynaldo has always lived a life with deep respect for the environment around him and has a passion to share his harmonious, healthy environment living through smart community planning and development. Reynaldo grew up as an avid fisherman, diver, paddler, and hiker who spent many of his years working as a guide in the dive industry. Reynaldo is the founder of Lake Worth Waterkeeper, a 501c3 and member of Waterkeeper Alliance that advocates for the Lake Worth Lagoon and its watershed throughout Palm Beach County and the greater Everglades ecosystem. Reynaldo also sits on the board of directors of both the Everglades Coalition and Florida Wildlife Federation. He was recently elected commissioner of Lake Worth, Florida. Reynaldo, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I mean, a great introduction. And as mentioned, I founded and started Lake Worth Waterkeeper. I'm also on the board of Florida Wildlife Federation, Everglades Coalition, and yeah, now I'm a commissioner. And I often think, I'm really appreciative of this opportunity because I don't always get the opportunity to talk about the story of how I got to these positions. And it wasn't, I wish I could say that I was one of those kids that when I was young, I knew what I was going to do since day one and, consciously chose to do that. But it kind of is a natural evolution just of my lifestyle. So I always like to start with what is the Lake Worth Lagoon? And the Lake Worth Lagoon is a really special body of water to my life. It is, if you look at South Florida and you look in the middle of the state, you have Lake Okeechobee. Well, due east of that, right on the Atlantic Ocean, running along there is the Lake Worth Lagoon. Relatively small. It's at the widest, I think about a mile or so wide, and it's more long than it is wide. It spans about 13 different cities in Palm Beach County. But overall, we're a part of the greater Everglades ecosystem. And that has changed dramatically with human interaction. And that's a really important distinction because it's a really big reason why I chose and have evolved into becoming, starting Lake Worth Waterkeeper and all the environmental work that I do. Because the thing to understand is that a little over 100 years ago, Lake Worth Lagoon, as the name implies, was actually a lake. It was a freshwater, mostly landlocked lake. I want you to think alligators, sawgrass, lily pads, that sort of thing. And then a little over 100 years ago, as humans, as colonizers essentially started moving in, full disclosure, as an organization, we do recognize that we are on stolen land and we're working to right a lot of those wrongs or make the situation as best as we can, because this once freshwater landlocked lake, which was surrounded by mostly the Yaga tribe and the Hobe and different tribes here, as they were displaced, as more people came in, more development came in, inlets were cut, and what you have is what you're looking at right now, which is on the screen right now, which is a coastal estuary. So that freshwater lake gave way to a coastal estuary of seagrass and mangroves, and it's worked really well. We have spotted eagle ray, as in this slide shows, gliding over some seagrass. Lake Worth Lagoon is a pretty special water body in terms of its wildlife. There's areas of the Lake Worth Lagoon. One in particular area that we work really hard to protect is called Munyon Cove, and it's known to have the highest density of juvenile green sea turtles in Florida. Some of our tag turtles that come out of our area, they've been tracked as far away as like the Yucatan and other parts of the world. So a lot of things worth protecting. The Palm Beach County, we're really lucky because Florida as a whole, government-wise and law-wise, is probably not great for environment, but Palm Beach County, we're pretty lucky to have a really specific office called ERM, Environmental Resources Management, and they do a lot of work to better the Lake Worth Lagoon. What you're looking at in this slide are some man-made islands, and in the middle, this was shortly after we had planted them with a lot of other groups. They're mangroves that are in those kind of flood areas, with sandbars on the side as a nesting area for birds. So a lot of work is being done to the Lake Worth Lagoon to fight climate warming. We focus on red mangroves because they're the best carbon sink. We're protecting our fisheries, you name it. We're doing all this restoration work because this body of water should technically be a freshwater lake, but now we're doing the best that we can given the circumstances. A lot of improvements, but also still a lot of serious environmental issues that we have to deal with. What you're looking at here is a photo of mine that got a lot of airplay last summer because this is a cyanobacteria bloom in Lake Okeechobee. This is a Pahokee Marina. People actually live in those boats that you see there. And this is a Lake Okeechobee and big parts of the Everglades, especially the northern estuaries like Lake Worth Lagoon, Indian River Lagoon, and Caloosahatchee River face serious cyanobacteria blooms. This is about as bad as it gets. Really powerful picture because it looks almost beautiful in a way. This is a cyanobacteria, just such an interesting organism, and but it's obviously a critically serious public health crisis for humans. It's environmentally destructive. If you look at the center of the photo, you can see kind of a trail following from the green of that dock on the top left-hand corner. There's a trail, and if you look closely, there's an alligator just absolutely struggling to swim through this. So we spend, this is a yearly problem in our watershed, and we spend a considerable amount of our work addressing this problem and trying to get Everglades restoration underway so that we can do away with these issues. So what does that work look like? Well, we do, the work that Lake Worth Waterkeeper does can be categorized into three things: scientific research, advocacy and legal work, and education. And we'll start with the science aspect. So we do water quality monitoring, bacteria sampling throughout the lagoon, throughout our watershed, cyanobacteria monitoring, just the kind of standard water quality monitoring efforts that a lot of waterkeepers around the world is generally our bread and butter. We also get to do some pretty innovative stuff. This photo is here because we are also the Palm Beach County coordinators for the horseshoe crab tagging program that is run by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. And that's significant because, like I said, Lake Worth Lagoon was a freshwater lake, but now as we're doing work to the lagoon and water quality improves and it becomes a better coastal estuary, things like horseshoe crabs start nesting, and they're notoriously picky for water quality and habitat. What you don't see in this picture is this is at a living shoreline project that was completely constructed by the county, and we as Lake Worth Waterkeeper, we help maintain it with our volunteers. And it's a heavily developed part of the lagoon. 70% of the Lake Worth Lagoon, its shoreline is actually seawall. So the remaining 30% is a mixture of maybe red mangrove shoreline and a significant amount of living shorelines that was constructed. Sometimes we get to do really fun stuff with our partners. This is a photo of us on Christmas, just last Christmas. That week, we got a phone call from a resident on the island of Palm Beach that on their dock, a lemon shark had a rope wrapped around its head. So with our friends from American Shark Conservancy, they do a lot of shark tagging and research. We were trying to locate this shark, and we did see it a couple times, but we weren't able to grab it because essentially the goal was for me, sounds like a crazy plan when I explain it, but the goal was for me and my friend Hannah to get in the water to grab this 6-7 foot long lemon shark and cut the rope off of it. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to catch up with it. One of the other things I mentioned, the Living Shoreline projects, we adopted them. I'll put that in quotes. We've adopted them from the county, meaning that we take the work on to maintain them, which is like, cleaning up. We use bi-weekly, we have volunteer events where we take volunteers out, we clean them up, we work on them, pull out invasives, and overall just monitor them. This is a living shoreline planter at one of the local parks in Lake Worth called Bryant Park that we maintain. This was a king high tide, so the water was really high and we were just kind of keeping an eye on it. Good group of volunteers, like I said, every other week, and we're out there, we're pulling, whether it's plants we don't want in the planter or we're planting mangroves, we're just doing maintenance. These two pictures are really good before and after of what we're doing. This planter here is probably about 150 feet long. It's at that same park, Bryant Park, but a different section. And this photo is when we planted it back in 2019. So you can see Spartina grass over most of it, and then you have the handful of red mangroves kind of peeking up. And this is the after. I took this maybe about a week ago, and now the red mangroves have really taken over. Parts of the planter are almost too thick to walk through, which is exactly what we want, because those red mangroves, like I said, they're the best carbon sink, rich biodiversity, lots of life in these planters now, and overall that equates to better water quality in the area. So how did this come to be, and what drives this work? I didn't touch on the education stuff just yet, but I spent a lot of my life, as Melissa graciously introed, paddling, kayaking, and working as a dive guide, especially for filmmakers, and taking people out to see some of the more significant wildlife encounters in our area around Lake Worth Lagoon and our offshore reefs. Famous for its Goliath grouper aggregations, lemon shark aggregations, so on and so forth. This is me just kayaking in the lagoon, a favorite pastime and tool that we use for monitoring. Agriculture is huge in my life. It's a big inspiration, and often a lot of people don't make that connection, but if you look at Palm Beach County, the western half of our watershed around Lake Okeechobee, huge agriculture community, famous for its massive sugar farms, which bring a world of environmental problems for our watershed. And I myself grew up with, graciously, because of my upbringing and my parents being from Central and South America, a big part of growing up has been a strong appreciation and understanding of things that we are seeing become pretty trendy in our area, like food foresting and regenerative agriculture for soil. And of course, fishing has been a big part of my life, both with Salvadoran and Argentina, huge fishing cultures, and it's always been a big part of my life, and the reason why, people like someone like me would love to have a healthy environment. So education is the big thing that we work on. I mentioned science, I mentioned policy. We're litigating to protect the Clean Water Act, for example. We protect areas of the lagoon from development, but a big thing we do is education, and you can kind of cycle through these, but this is one of our Living Shoreline projects, and we bring kids right out into these projects so that they can learn about them and learn about career opportunities and overall be exposed. You can go to the next slide. Overall, just kind of be exposed to the things that I was luckily had with my parents. The goal is, getting kids out to experience these habitats, these adventures, if you will, because that's what inspired me to get to where I'm at today, to starting in Lake Worth Waterkeeper and focusing, pretty much my entire life to environmentalism. The big K-pop tree that's on Palm Beach, it's kind of famous. We also work in a lot of history, but it's right on the Lake Worth Lagoon. This is, we call these group our kids, we call them our lagoonies. And we take them out, and a big part of it is to go out into these habitats and experience wildlife. So here's one kind of looking at a gopher tortoise in one of our scrub habitats. In the lagoon, seine netting, just seeing what's out there and what kind of fisheries are out there to protect. Of course, paddling. This is a great day. That girl there, Leah, that's a good friend of mine who's paddling with her, and her daughter Leah was 7 at the time. And by the end of the day, it was pretty windy, and the waves were taller than her kayak was long, but she is an advanced paddler for her age, true waterkeeper. And of course, surf days, because surfing has been a big part of my life, especially, from this El Salvador side. And of course, fishing. We take our kids out fishing, not just so that they learn the techniques of how to do it, but they learn about the fish that they catch, monitoring, and things to look out for in terms of habitat and health. And of course, that circles that sometimes it's full circle, right? The Lagoonies program, our education programs, which is really extensive. And I encourage everyone to check it out on our website. But sometimes it comes full circle. This is actually a photo of my parents. You know, fishing generally drives me around the world, if you will. Whenever I get the chance, I love to travel and just, you know, take on new adventures, and wildlife encounters and fishing are a big part of that. So this is one of my favorite places on the planet. This is Slough Creek in Yellowstone National Park. And last summer it was kind of full circle. As a guide, I was able to guide my parents to this really remote river valley. It was a bit of an adventure, but I think they appreciated seeing where I spend so much of my life. So, you know, it's really important for me and my heritage. The big thing about our education programs, and it's still a goal that we're working towards, is we really want to provide these experiences to, you know, kids and future generations, but more specifically to the segments of the population that don't generally get these experiences. Something to understand about our watershed, you know, I mentioned the western half is largely agriculture, very huge minority communities. Lake Worth, the town where I live in and am a commissioner, at least 40% of our town are Central American immigrants, and the vast majority are Mayan. So they don't even speak Spanish or English. They speak one of many different Mayan languages. And one of our big goals that we still aiming to resolve as a younger, you know, as an organization, is we're trying to grow our programs and make them available to these segments of the population that otherwise don't get these same experiences. Florida's a tough place to live. It's incredibly expensive. It's not an equitable place. So everything we can do to provide these experiences is really a big driver of all of our programs. You know, me coming from that population, that community, I am very gracious for the opportunities that were presented to me because, you know, quite frankly, growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. So the things that we ended up doing for fun were things like camping and fishing, and the things that were low cost because we're so lucky to live in an area in the Everglades where so many public areas are, you know, generally accessible. The skills and the time is certainly something that's a challenge to make available, but it's something we really strive, and it's something that I know Oceana really takes to heart as well. So I really appreciate this opportunity to share my story, and really, you know, want to thank that. And I, of course, encourage everyone to check out our website, lakeworthwaterkeeper.org. And, you know, you have a lot of information of all the things that we do, especially on the education stuff. It's more than just providing field trips and adventures and things like that. You'll see as you look through all the stuff that we write, we're more systemic in trying to make a really conscious and deliberate change in Florida's weak education system, if you will. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Reynaldo. As a fellow Floridian and South Floridian exactly, I'm super impressed and grateful for the work that you're doing as commissioner and board of director, and of course with your 501c3. So thank you so much for all of your hard work and dedication to ocean conservation. And thank you, of course, for your time and sharing your story. I know that everyone at Oceana and everyone that will watch this and is watching is incredibly grateful. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for staying with us for our 3 great presenters. We are now on our final part of the presentation where I, the Southern California Field Representative for Oceana, am going to discuss the Magnuson-Stevens Act. If you're interested in learning more about what Oceana specifically in Southern California does, please follow us at Oceana in SoCal on Instagram. So what is the Magnuson-Stevens Act? So the MSA for short is our nation's blue ribbon science-based fisheries management law. Some even say it's the world's envy in fisheries management. The MSA sets standards and parameters for how we govern our marine fisheries and U.S. federal waters, along with the focus of long-term biological and economic sustainability of marine fisheries. Here are the objectives of the MSA. The purpose is to prevent overfishing, rebuild fish stocks, reduce bycatch, conserve habitats that support sustainable fisheries, increase long-term social and economic benefits, and of course, ensure a sustainable supply of seafood. And the MSA truly does work. Some examples of successful stories are with the Atlantic sea scallop, the Mid-Atlantic summer flounder, the Pacific widow rockfish, and the Gulf of Mexico gag grouper. This worked because of the strong conservation provisions that the MSA includes. These success stories and the law's requirements that made them happen had to do with halting overfishing, rebuilding fish stocks, and protecting our ocean resources. Thanks to bipartisan reauthorizations of the law, many of our fisheries have come back from the brink of collapse after decades of chronic overfishing. As mentioned earlier, the MSA has a critical role in making sure that the economy of fisheries continues. So in 2019, US commercial fisheries landed 9.3 billion pounds of seafood, which is valued at $5.5 billion. Saltwater recreational fishing remains a key contributor to the national economy, with anglers taking more than 187 million trips in 2019. The MSA is under threat. With recent attempts to reauthorize the MSA in previous sessions of Congress, this would have weakened or even eliminated many of the MSA's strong conservation standards, which would have equaled disaster for our fisheries and our ocean ecosystems as a whole. This is why it is so important that we write, call, and email our members of Congress and let them know that we want them to stand up for us and for our oceans and continue to support a strong MSA if any upcoming reauthorization attempts are presented. If there are any attempts to weaken the law's conservation provisions, we need to fight back, protect the MSA, and of course, keep our oceans fishy. How can you help? Well, you can sign our petition. As mentioned, you can call, email, or write to your members of Congress and support local fisheries and enjoy delicious, sustainable seafood. Here is our QR code that you can scan with your smartphone, which will take you to our petition, and you can learn more about how to keep our oceans fishy with Oceana. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time for joining us and listening to our speakers and the Magnuson-Stevens Act. Thank you for listening, and goodbye. Ha sido un momento fantástico. Gracias a todos para escuchar. Adiós.
Tune in tomorrow evening, October 12th, for our second Keep Oceans Fishy event focused on women in fishery science and ocean conservation.